Daniel Mercer knew something was wrong the moment the applause began. He stood near the back of the packed conference hall, half hidden behind a tall black speaker. The lights were bright. The air smelled of perfume and polished wood, and a giant screen flashed the company logo in bold blue letters. People were clapping, cheering, even standing. On stage, under a sharp white spotlight, Victor Hale lifted a crystal trophy with both hands and smiled, like a man who had just conquered the world. Daniel didn't clap. He couldn't. Victor's voice rang through the hall, smooth and confident. "This project," he said, pausing for effect, "was built from the ground up with vision, sacrifice, and relentless nights of work." Daniel felt his stomach twist. Ground up. Relentless nights. He remembered those nights. The cold pizza boxes stacked beside his laptop. The dark circles under his eyes. The way his fingers cramped from typing line after line of code. He remembered sleeping on the office couch while Victor went home early, promising to handle investors in the morning. The screen behind Victor displayed images of the software interface and interface, the clean dashboard, the predictive system that adapted in real time. The security layer Daniel had designed after months of testing, Victor continued. "There were moments I thought it wouldn't happen, but I believed in the idea. I trusted my instincts." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had trusted something too. He had trusted Victor. 3 months earlier. They had sat in Daniel's small kitchen, papers spread across the table. Daniel had just completed the first full prototype. His hands shook slightly as he explained how it worked. How it could change the industry. How it could save companies millions by predicting system failures before they happened. Victor had listened, with sharp focus, eyes gleaming. "This is it," Victor had said. "This is our breakthrough." Our dot. They had shaken hands. Victor promised to pitch it to investors while Daniel refined the final build. They had always worked that way, Victor. The face, Daniel, the builder. It made sense. Daniel preferred quiet rooms and code. Victor thrived in boardrooms and spotlight. It felt balanced until tonight. On stage, Victor laughed lightly as the host praised him for his solo genius. Solo. Daniel scanned the large banner beside the stage. It read, "Victor Hale, founder and creator, no mention of Daniel Mercer." His chest felt hollow, like the air had been pulled out of him. He checked the printed program in his hand. It listed keynote speakers, sponsors, investors. Under project credits, there was a small team mentioned: junior developers, marketing staff. Not him. A slow realization began to settle in. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a missed slide or a rushed introduction. This was deliberate. The applause grew louder as Victor finished his speech. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Victor stepped down from the stage and shook hands with executives Daniel recognized from industry magazines. Daniel stayed in the shadows. He thought about walking up to the stage right then, grabbing the microphone, saying he didn't build it alone. But he didn't move. Instead, he watched Victor smile for photos. Watched him accept praise for features Daniel had spent years designing in silence. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unknown number. "Access revoked. Please contact admin." His breath caught. He quickly opened his company email app. It logged him out. He tried again. Invalid credentials. Another message arrived in his inbox. One personal subject. Organizational update. The email was short, cold. It explained that, due to restructuring, his role was no longer required. His final compensation would be processed within 30 days. He was asked to return any company property immediately. Restructuring. Daniel felt the room tilt slightly. Victor hadn't just taken credit. He had erased him the rest of the event. Blurred. Daniel left before the after-party began. The night air outside was sharp and cool, but it didn't clear his head. The city lights shimmered in front of him as he stood on the sidewalk, unsure where to go. He tried calling Victor straight to voicemail. He sent a text. "We need to talk." No reply. He stood there for 10 full minutes, watching guests spill out of the building, laughing, praising the brilliant founder. None of them noticed the man who had built the core of that brilliance. Daniel walked home instead of calling a ride. He needed the movement. The steady rhythm of his steps helped him think. How long had Victor planned this? He replayed recent weeks in his mind. Victor had insisted on handling investor meetings alone. He had asked for full access to Daniel's master files for backup purposes. He had grown distant, harder to reach. Daniel had blamed stress. He had missed the signs. By the time Daniel reached his apartment, anger had replaced shock. Not loud anger, not shouting, a colder kind. The kind that settled deep and steady inside. His apartment felt smaller than usual. His laptop still sat open on the dining table, lines of code glowing softly on the screen. He stared at it. This was his work, his vision, his late nights and early mornings. He opened his backup folder. Thankfully, Daniel had always been cautious. Every major version of the software was saved on external drives. Time-stamped, documented. Victor could take the spotlight, but he couldn't rewrite history. Daniel sank into his chair and closed his eyes. For a brief moment, sadness pushed through. The anger. He thought of the early days when he and Victor worked from a shared garage. They had eaten instant noodles and laughed about becoming industry giants. One day, they had promised to succeed together. Had Victor always seen him as a stepping stone? Daniel stood and walked to his bookshelf. On the top shelf sat a framed photo from their first startup competition. They were younger, smiling wide, holding a small plaque for second place. Victor's arm was around Daniel's shoulders. Daniel picked up the frame and studied Victor's face. There had been pride there. Real pride. Or had he imagined it? His phone buzzed again. A social media notification. He opened it reluctantly. Photos of Victor flooded his feed. Congratulations. Well-deserved. True visionary. Daniel scrolled through comments praising Victor's individual genius. The narrative was already forming. Victor as the mastermind. Victor as the soul. Creator. Daniel set the phone down slowly. He wasn't just fighting a man. He was fighting a story. Being written in real time, he walked back to his laptop and began opening files one by one. Original drafts. Early prototypes labeled with his initials. Emails where Victor clearly acknowledged Daniel as lead developer and co-creator. The evidence was there, but evidence meant conflict. Lawyers, public. Statements, headlines. Daniel imagined the chaos of exposing Victor publicly. The interviews, the online debates, the company's stock shaking, employees caught in the middle. Was it worth it? His hands hovered over the keyboard. He wasn't a confrontational person. He avoided drama. He preferred solutions over battles. Yet something inside him refused to accept silence. He remembered the handshake in his kitchen. The promise. Trust had been broken, and broken trust changes people. Daniel leaned back and stared at the ceiling. He felt two forces pulling at him. One whispered, "Let it go. Start fresh. Build something new." The other said, "If you walk away, you confirm his version of the story." He couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Victor under the spotlight, accepting praise that should have been shared. By morning, the shock had fully transformed. Daniel wasn't confused anymore. He was certain Victor had chosen ambition over loyalty, power over partnership. And Daniel now stood at a crossroads. He could disappear quietly, letting Victor's version become permanent, or he could step forward and demand the truth as sunlight filtered through his window. Daniel realized something else. The betrayal hurt not only because of lost credit, but because it forced him to see Victor clearly. The friend he admired had made a calculated choice. It wasn't an emotional mistake. It was strategy. That realization cut deeper than public humiliation. Daniel stood, showered, dressed, and packed his external drives into a small black bag. His movements were calm, focused. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was thinking revenge didn't have to mean destruction. Could mean exposure. Could mean reclaiming what was his. He looked around his apartment one more time before leaving. The space felt different now. Not like a place of comfort, but like the starting point of something new. Victor had taken the stage, but the story wasn't over. As Daniel locked his door behind him, one thought stayed steady in his mind. Betrayal. Maybe quick, but justice can be patient. And patience, Daniel realized, could be far more powerful. Daniel did not rush. That surprised even him. The morning after the launch, instead of sending angry messages or posting long statements online, he sat at his desk with a notebook and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. What do I really want? Not headlines. He had investors, media support, and a polished story. Daniel had external drives lined up beside his laptop. Highlighted sentences where Victor clearly referred to the software as our build and Daniel's architecture. He sorted drafts by date. Slowly, carefully, he was building a wall of proof. As he worked, anger flickered under the surface. Not loud, not explosive. Just steady heat. He had taken the public risk. Maybe he believed leadership meant ownership? Daniel paused and imagined Victor in his office, staring at the award. Was he celebrating freely, or watching the door, expecting Daniel to walk in? That thought gave Daniel strange comfort. Victor knew what he had done. Daniel decided his revenge would not be loud destruction. The lawyer reviewed the documents, nodding slowly. You have a strong claim, she said. Very strong. This won't be about emotion. It will be about authorship and contribution. That was exactly what Daniel wanted. Not drama-documentation. Still, he almost stopped himself. He could walk away, start a new company. Let Victor keep the spotlight. But every time he imagined that future, it felt unfinished. Like leaving a book half-read. Days passed quickly. Daniel drafted a formal notice asserting his role as co-creator and requesting recognition and compensation. It was professional, firm, and clear. No accusations. He hesitated. Once this message went out, there would be no quiet return to the past. He hit send. Victor responded within hours. Daniel, this is unnecessary. Let's talk privately. Daniel read the message twice. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just control. They agreed to meet in Victor's office after business hours. When Daniel entered the building, memories hit him fast. The glass walls, the reception desk. Some looked confused, as if they had heard rumors but didn't know what to believe. Victor's office door was open. Victor stood by. The window, city lights glowing behind him. He turned slowly when Daniel stepped in. You could have called, Victor said, voice steady. I did, Daniel replied. Silence stretched between them. Victor gestured toward a chair. Then it needs to be. Victor continued. For a brief second, the mask slipped. Frustration flashed across Victor's face. If I hadn't moved fast, we'd still be pitching. Daniel absorbed the words carefully. There it was Victor's justification. Not because of anger, but because of truth pressing in from both sides. I'm not here to destroy the company, Daniel continued. I'm here to correct the record. Victor looked at him, studying his expression. Maybe he expected threats. Maybe he expected rage. Instead. Timestamps, drafts, emails, I'm filing formally. Victor flipped through a few pages and his confidence wavered. Victor asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. No, I'd stand up. That difference hung in the air. The meeting ended without shouting. No slammed doors, just tension and reality. Over the next weeks, negotiations moved forward. Lawyers exchanged drafts. Compensation figures adjusted. Daniel felt the strain daily. Revenge was not satisfying in the way he imagined. It was exhausting. Paperwork, strategy, waiting at night. He questioned himself. Was this worth it? More calculating. Himself again. This wasn't about hurting Victor. It was about refusing to disappear by the time mediation was scheduled. Daniel understood something important. Revenge didn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looked like patience, discipline. He knew the real battle wasn't against Victor, it was against the temptation to let anger define him. The outcome would depend on one last choice. The final meeting was set for Friday evening. Daniel arrived early. The conference room was quiet, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass walls. A long table stood in the center, polished and cold. Folders were neatly arranged at each seat. His name was printed on a small white card. So was Victor's. Daniel sat down and folded his hands. His heart was steady, but his thoughts moved fast. Months ago, he had walked into this building as a partner. Tonight, he walked in as a claimant. The door opened. Victor stepped inside with his lawyer. He looked tired, not broken, not defeated, just worn. Success had given him attention, but this process had taken something from him, too. They exchanged brief nods. No small talk. The lawyers began outlining the terms. Recognition as co-founder. Public amendment of official records. Financial compensation. Reflecting Daniel's contribution. Clear acknowledgement of intellectual ownership in future materials. The words were formal, almost sterile. But behind every sentence was something deeply personal. Victor listened without interrupting. His fingers tapped lightly against the table. When the lawyer finished, silence filled the room. "This will damage the brand," Victor said finally. "It will correct it," Daniel replied. Victor looked at him, searching for anger, maybe hoping to find something he could argue against. But Daniel's expression was calm. "You could have destroyed everything," Victor said quietly. "You had enough to start a public war." "I know," Daniel answered. "Why didn't you?" Daniel paused. He had asked himself that question many times. In the beginning, he had imagined exposing Victor mid-presentation, watching investors pull back, seeing headlines spread across every platform. The thought had felt powerful, but power built on destruction didn't feel like justice. "Anymore, because I built that system too," Daniel said. "Burning it would mean burning my own work." Victor leaned back in his chair. Confidence he once carried so easily seemed thinner now. "I thought you'd stay silent," he admitted. "I almost did." The honesty hung between them. Victor rubbed his forehead. "I convinced myself I deserved full credit. I told myself I carried the pressure, made the decisions. I thought that was enough. And was it?" Daniel asked. Victor didn't answer. The lawyers resumed discussion, finalizing adjustments. The tone shifted from defensive to practical. Numbers were confirmed. Statements were drafted. A joint press release was prepared, carefully worded to reflect collaboration from the beginning. As the papers were passed around for signatures, Daniel felt the weight of the moment. This was the climax he had imagined in different forms. In some versions, Victor was humiliated. In others, Daniel walked away entirely. Instead, this ending was quieter. Victor signed first. His pen moved slowly across the page. Then he slid the folder toward Daniel. Daniel picked up the pen. For a brief second, doubt flickered again. Would this truly satisfy him? Would recognition erase betrayal? He signed. The sound of pen against paper was soft but final. The meeting ended without drama. No raised voices. No dramatic exits. Just handshakes that felt formal rather than friendly. As Daniel walked out of the building, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady. Over the next few weeks, the corrections went public. The company website updated its founder section. Industry. Articles added Daniel's name as co-creator and lead architect. The press release framed it as a clarification of roles from the early development phase. The reaction was controlled. No scandal exploded. No collapse followed. But within professional circles, the message was clear. The story had changed. Victor remained CEO. The company continued to grow. Yet something subtle shifted in how people viewed him. Trust, once questioned, never fully returned to its original shine. Daniel received messages from former colleagues congratulating him. Some admitted they had suspected something felt off. Others thanked him for standing up calmly instead of creating chaos. One evening, Daniel sat in his apartment, the same place where this journey had begun. The framed photo of him and Victor still sat on the shelf. He picked it up again. The memory no longer felt sharp. It felt distant. Revenge, he realized, had transformed during the process. At first, it was about making Victor feel the same pain. Then it became about proving a point. In the end, it became about self-respect. He had expected satisfaction too. Feel dramatic? Instead, it felt quiet. There was no rush of victory, no overwhelming relief. It's just a clear sense that he had protected his integrity. Weeks later, Victor requested a private meeting. Daniel considered declining, but agreed. They met at a small cafe, neutral ground. No lawyers this time. Victor looked different, less polished, more reflective. I should have handled it differently, Victor said after a long pause. Ambition clouded my judgment. Daniel studied him. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. I won't pretend this didn't change things. Daniel replied, I know. Victor said they didn't rebuild their friendship that day. Some bridges once cracked cannot return to their original shape. But they left the cafe with something close to understanding. As Daniel walked home, he thought about the path he had chosen. If he had gone public in anger, he might have won. Louder. But he would have carried bitterness longer. Instead, he chose measured justice. The desire for revenge had once burned bright. Now it felt like a lesson rather than a weapon. He learned that betrayal tests character twice: first in how it hurts you, and second in how you respond. Revenge can promise satisfaction, but often it deepens wounds. Justice, handled with restraint, can restore balance without destroying everything in its path. Daniel unlocked his apartment door and stepped inside. The room felt different now, because the world had changed, but because he had. He had faced betrayal, he had faced his anger. And when the moment came to choose between destruction and dignity, he chose dignity. That choice, more than any public recognition, was his real victory.